There's no question. There was, in our neighborhood, a lot of alcoholism and a lot of abuse. 2 days before my dad died, I went to visit him in the hospital, and he said to me, "You know I never loved you." One of the most brutal things about alcoholism or drug addiction, it destroys any love around you.
Right.
It's like I was so lost, man. I had no love in my life at all. I had no real friends at all. Life from 22 to 27 was a gong show. It was a freaking war.
One crazy event after another.
Yeah.
Labeled a slow learner.
I always felt a little bit
Always felt
different.
like there was something wrong with me.
I was so embarrassed. Wasn't ready to see myself.
I can't go any lower.
Don't sell yourself short.
Uncovering all those feelings. Everything was lifted at that moment.
This really wasn't about not drinking.
Hi, everybody. My name is Corey Rabin. Welcome to Crosstalk Podcasts, where we try to do our part to inspire recovery from addiction and find a better way. Whether you're considering a life free from dependency on drugs or you're already on that path, Crosstalk is here for you. Each episode, we do a deep dive into the stories and experience of people who have walked the walk of recovery alongside experts in the field to enhance our understanding of addiction and recovery. Our mission is simple: to help you navigate the challenges and celebrate the victories along your path to a better way. So buckle up and let's hit the road as we embark on this transformative journey together. This is Crosstalk Podcasts, and I'm very happy to welcome a terrific guest. Irene and I are here together. And Irene, hi.
Hi.
And we're here with one of our favorite people on the face of the earth, Jimmy R. Jimmy, welcome to Crosstalk.
Well, thank you, Corey. Rainey, thank you.
Really glad to have you here today. In the South Florida world of recovery, Jimmy is somebody that people love, we love, and we're so happy to have you here on Crosstalk.
Well, it's great to be here.
So, Jimmy, how did things start in your life? Like, how's childhood? Just give us a little bit of a primer on how things started.
Childhood, what's so great about, being a human being, right? A spiritual being is, we can use our memories and, transport ourselves back in time, which, I think is fascinating. So, I think I had a really great childhood until when you're a real young kid, I think everything's great, right? I mean, it's like whatever. But, some of the things that I kind of remember just as a kid, I really did not like school. That was a problem, being locked up in there. I'm talking like first grade, right? So,
what didn't you like about school?
If I really contemplate why I didn't like it, I just, I didn't like sitting down and following directions. That was a problem. And they let me out for recess like everybody, right? That was the charge of the day, recess, right, out in the yard. So I decided, I think I'll take off and go home. But that was a big thing because they lost a kid. I just went home and, which that pissed a few people off. But that was kind of how I rolled, so.
Had the family like that idea, or they were not happy about it?
Well, I think the school, I think my dad didn't care. I thought it was kind of cool. It's like, hey, I got a little FU in me right away, right? Which, was great. Another memory of just going back as a kid is, this was kind of I think maybe a little bit of a traumatic thing for me, right? The last day of school, first grade, coming home on the bus, I didn't open up my report card. Didn't really give a shit. It's the last day of school, whatever. So somebody asked to see my report card. They opened it up. And they couldn't really explain to me that I had failed first grade, right? And they started making fun of me. So I took one from downtown And I waxed that kid hard in the school bus in the last day of school because I was so hurt I couldn't understand that I had to do it all over again, so that was kind of something that I remember about childhood, as a real young kid, so.
Did you show up the second time around?
Well, yeah, and then you go through first grade and then you get through it, but, school was never my highlight in my life, I just wasn't that guy.
Mom and Dad, were they supportive, or were they angry, or it must have been
Well, I think, I often talk to my older brother about, our childhood and stuff. I just love being outside and da-da-da-da and doing my thing. But I think there's no question there was, in our neighborhood, a lot of alcoholism and a lot of abuse. My dad went on 27 missions, and he flew a bomber in World War II and never said a word, but he was a traumatized guy. And, I didn't last long in the house. I was out when I was 16, and, that's the way it rolled. My brother joined the Marines, went to Vietnam.
Was he hard on you guys?
What's that?
Was he really hard on you?
Yeah, I would say that would be for sure. And then there was, without question, a tremendous lack of love, and he just couldn't show it. I have so much empathy for my father today, and I loved him, and I didn't see him for 8 years, and then I was my brother's sponsor when he became Catholic. I became Catholic when I was 4 years sober, and my older brother followed me in. I hadn't talked to my dad in 8 years, so he knew I was Catholic. So 2 days before my dad died, I went to visit him in the hospital, and he said to me, I never loved you. Wow. Right? So, but then he said, which was unbelievable, do you think they'll let me in? And I knew what he was talking about. And the priest, I just went to this church, and so the priest, the Monsignor I got, was a full chaplain and a colonel in the Air Force, both Vietnam and Korea. So I said, hold on, Dad, I'll go get Father Hamilton. And I met Father Hamilton in the hospital, and he looked at me and goes, Jim, get out of here and don't come back. And he said my dad had a beautiful death. So that was a big deal. That was my dad making amends to me because I had tried to make amends to him. So it was a real torturous, I think, youth. There's no question. Like, you remember those old milk bottles, like thick? They would deliver milk. It was challenging,
Did those break, you mean?
Oh, that they would get whipped at you. And there was a lot of abuse and that kind of thing. But I don't think that was uncommon in our neighborhood, that kind of thing. So
can I go back just to ask you a question? You said a couple of days before your dad died, you said, I never loved you.
Right.
Did he mean that he never actually loved you, or did he mean he was never able to love you properly?
Well, probably in his mind, he knew that he never showed me love.
And was apologizing.
Amen. And he said, you think they'll let me in other words?
Got
because it. He was, I think, when he knew that I was my brother's sponsor, when he became Catholic, the first time I saw him in 8 years, my brother had a relationship with him because my brother had always done everything right, joined the Marine Corps, did everything the way you were supposed to do, did good in school and all that shit. So, boom, he was still very much communicating with my father. So.
And was your dad a drinker, or was
Oh
he
yeah,
just
and
a lot of PTSD?
yeah, I mean, he would every once in a while fly off the handle and get
Right.
arrested, and you know, he had a big thing. He always liked to, yeah, he liked to hang out with the gangsters and that kind of thing, you know. Yeah. So, but other than that, the neighborhood I grew up in and all that, I have a lot of gratitude for that, and all that we went through as kids was actually the really great and the best my family could do, right? So that I know for sure. And I think my dad, Father Hamilton, was no joke guy. You know, he's giving me a ride up to meet the bishop. This Father Hamilton, he loved me because here's this young guy who wants to become Catholic. And he just said, he looked at me and said, Jimmy, they all ask for mommy and God at the end. And they try to come to grips with dying. So the priests have a lot of knowledge of that. So he spent a lot of time with my dad in the last couple days of his life.
Real blessing.
Yeah, that to me was like a big thing, and my brother too. So, you know, you never know what will happen in life.
You were telling us about how things were when you were about 16 or so, and I'd love to know a little bit. I know there was some time where you started to use substances.
Well, yeah, and I think, you know, I was I never made it out of high school, so I was hanging out on the corner, just doing stupid stuff, and you know, drinking and drugs are just part of the culture, and you know, selling drugs on the corner, and you know, drinking. And then my first job was real job was. I was talking to you about, you were talking about something about plastics today. I worked in a plastics factory, you know, whatever. But I've done a lot of things in life. I'm so blessed to be living and really try to live fully. So my first real job was a steel worker, iron worker, you know, which was a great job. And I loved doing that. It was real hard work. But there was always a massive amounts of... you know, drugs and alcohol. Like the air horn would go off at the yard. And I'm talking about 3,000 guys who were building submarines, you know, which really hip job, very hard work, which I loved, by the way. And I would sprint to the car and, you know, and I had to like get souped up, you know, back in the day, it was great, right? It was, you know, the 8-track tapes and all that, right? And
just for our listeners who don't know what an 8-track tape is,
right. But you know, for those that do, so I'd sprint to the package store. In Rhode Island, they didn't have, you know, you had to go to the package store to even buy beer. So you know, I'd get a 1.5 pint and you know, maybe twist up a couple of left-handed Luckies on the way. There was always a lot of speed too, like Black Beauties and that kind of, a lot of pharmaceutical drugs as well, and a lot of you know, hallucinogens as well is what we kind of like. That was my generation. There wasn't a lot of heroin in my, you know, like immediate area where we hung out. So that was not a big deal. Nobody was really into the opiates.
Quaaludes.
Lots of actually, Corey.
I don't know anything about.
So
I
like
missed that.
these
I
things
missed that
are like
bus.
these things are like.
I'm sure I would have
unbelievable.
loved them.
So of course I got pulled over, and you know, at the time they'll bring you in front of the judge, right? And they said, yes, we pulled Mr. R over. He was doing 3 miles an hour, so I got pulled over doing 3. So that's Quaalude.
That's probably the only story we've had where you're going that far under the limit, right?
Yeah. So I mean, you know,
You must have had a souped-up car.
yeah, and you know, and then I went through a whole host of cars, and then it became like I was all over the country, because after I did my internship at the shipyard, I would just travel around the country working mostly on nuclear powerhouses and big industrial power plants, mostly nuclear plants, but I did work on some coal burners. I worked on some high rises and stuff like that.
That is so scary, though, to think about all the drugs and the alcohol and the fact that you were building nuclear.
Well, yeah, and that was yes, and there was a lot of and there was a lot of there were a lot of drugs in the shipyard and any of that kind of setting. And what movie did Matthew McConaughey do that where he had gotten AIDS? Probably the best depiction of the kind of work, because he did very heavy industrial construction on that, and he was hanging out the kind of shitholes I would hang out as a construction guy like that, in that kind of lifestyle. Exactly. And obviously he contracted AIDS, not from
using, but from other things.
Yes. And that was, and I was all over the country doing that,
Wow.
Whiskey Bent and Hellbound and all that. And then it got so bad I just couldn't, first of all, couldn't drive anymore, simply, getting.
Well, let's not fast forward too much, because I want to hear, we're at 16, you're doing all of these things, and you start traveling across America. Was that the next step?
Yeah.
Okay.
My first nuclear powerhouse was in Winsboro, South Carolina, which is, they always put these things in rural America, outside, pretty far outside anyway. So I'm working there, making a lot of money at the time as a young kid too. So, yeah, but I ended up in Lexington County Jail a couple times, just stupid stuff, just.
And how old are you at this time?
I'm like maybe 20, 21. Okay. I'm a young guy. I'm working around a lot of Vietnam vets at the time. A lot of Vietnam vets, these powerhouses working and make a lot of money. So that's how I ended up in Charleston County Detox. I decided, let's go to the beach, boys, so we decided, let's roll down to the coast and party, whatever. But yeah, of course, I decided to take on the Marine Corps. That was not a good call, Corey. And of course, I got arrested, and all of that goes along with that. Then had a seizure in that jail and went to detox in Charleston County Detox. But that's happened many times. My life from 22 to 27 was a gong show. It was a freaking war.
One crazy event after another.
A lot of crazy events. And I'm just blessed. I love AA so much when I think back on it. It's like I was so lost, man. I had no love in my life at all. I had no real friends at all. But you're too tough to admit that. You can't admit that.
Right.
No man would do that. So you can't admit that.
What were the culminating events? You said 20 to 27. So what started to happen?
Well, I was actually down in Lauderdale, and this was very near the end. And obviously, I was working for a ship repair company down at the port, and obviously it was, living in a place with, like no furniture, with just carnies. I was hanging out with a bunch of carnies, and it was bad. And
27.
What's that? Yeah, I'm probably 27 at the time. So obviously I ended up in Broward County Jail. I had another seizure, which was not unusual. And then I went to a detox off of Las Olas.
Nice neighborhood.
Right. So it's right next to 7-Eleven. So I decided to take my wife. This was just 2 years ago. So anyway, I look over there and I go, that's the detox I was in. And you remember all this and how lost I was. I mean, it was like, and then I got a ride up to Atlanta from the Carneys, and I was living in this, they didn't have, it was like boarding houses. It was like where the marginalized would live. I was living on the fringes of society, and
What did you tell your wife when you were near there?
Yeah, because she noticed. I'm glad. I'm losing a little. I'm getting like when I put these images in my head, sometimes it gets difficult. But well, not really. It's more joy. It's like, my God, I thank God every day. So she noticed that something was wrong. I got emotional, and so she noticed it. I told her a little bit about it, So, and a lot of times, my wife, because like I don't share a lot of this stuff. Like, for instance, all the boys I know that I'm very close with, they never knew I had a younger brother. Why would I even mention that, So other things that come up, like my wife said, hey, how come you don't have a picture of your dad in the house? I have a picture of my sponsor, my brother, but not my father, which is strange. I don't know, why, but, probably traumatized, but things like that come, all this is coming up, right? I'd never
I've never seen you get this emotional, and it's kind of
when
nice to see that you're human,
Well, when you bring yourself back there, and it's the joy of being in AA and sober, and when I got emotional, my wife saw that. Thank you, bro.
I have tissues.
That was really key. She loves me so much, and so yeah. Then I have a beautiful wife, and all this stuff that has been added on to me because of AA. So I was in Atlanta, and I got in a fight, and I never won, and I was kind of beat up, and living in this like place with the 10 padlocks on the front door, right across the street from the Salvation Army. Right next to that is a check cashing place, which is very standard operation protocol. And then I would work out of these manpower places, the temporary workforces, right? So that was the kind of life, bad, like no love, no. So anyway, one of the guys said, hey, I'm going to AA. And I said, I'll go with you.
Is that the first time you thought about doing it?
And
after going through so many detoxes, none of those places ever recommended it?
Well, maybe, but I just never went, and it just was not part of who I was or what I was about at the time. So I went to that meeting, and it was in Marietta, Georgia. How the hell I ended up there is another story. I just did. But anyway, and I was freshly beaten up. I'm so blessed that Kreger and Neil Z, I met my sponsor before he passed away. So this guy comes up to me and goes, hey, you okay? And I go, yeah, I'm fine. And he said, well, it doesn't look like you won. And I said, which was perfect for me, right? So, and then he said, do you think you can not drink today? And then he said, probably not. He goes, why don't you hang out with me today? So, anyway, Jojo, who was my sponsor for 36 years until he passed away, He hung out with me all day. Now, the guy's got 4 years sober. He's got 5 kids. He's driving a shitbox Maverick, and he's got no teeth. But JoJo, a legitimate badass. This guy had, played 2 sports for the, Division I and had a contract with the Braves and stuff. This guy's a legitimate athlete and tough guy. So he goes, I'm going to be a doctor. And I said, there's no effing way. You're from Lowell, Mass. Nothing from Lowell. So anyway, he goes, yeah, I'm taking you to campus. So he took me, and I go, JoJo, I just made, but I'm going to get sick, bro. He goes, don't be a wimp. I'm a doctor. Don't be a wimp. And he took me to the school, to med school with him. He's like, oh, he did become a doctor, by the way. So
That's
from
crazy.
that day, I didn't drink that day, and he told me his entire story. And hope was born in my soul. I didn't know it at the time that hope is the anchor of the soul. Spirituality. My soul was so sick and lost. So I never had another drink. It's been 42 years. He also said that you can stay with me. And I slept next to little Matthew, a baby, an infant, and unbelievable relationship and an unbelievable life started at that point, no question. There's not a day go by that meeting wasn't the most significant thing in my life. So
for people who are at a place that are watching this, who don't know what to do, is there something that you could say that you went through by your own experience to tell our listeners who are trying to find a different way of what they need to do in order to be able to catch the buzz, so to speak, to start this?
Yeah, and I think the greatest, one of the most brutal things about alcoholism or drug addiction, it destroys any love around you. It just does. And, that's key. Creates fierce resentment and a lot of spiritual disease. So I don't know anything about treatment. I don't know anything about counseling. I know AA, right? And I think one of the most brilliant things in AA is the ability to relate to alcoholism on a level of our common bond of being alcoholics. See, that's what Joe gave me, is that, hey, I haven't had a drink in 4 years. I'm becoming a doctor. This is exactly what, and he stressed the spiritual features freely, day one. That's page 93 in the big book. And that's how I got sober. So when you meet new guys, I feel such a sense of duty. And it's free, which is great. And there's no attachments in AA, you have a desire to stop drinking, and any message given without, and you can be brutally honest and just a regular guy, which I am, but they know it's coming from a place of love. And love in itself is such a great thing that the definition, especially with men, and they're never going to admit they're lonely. They're never going to admit they don't have any love. They're never going to admit that any of that. You know that before you meet them.
Or that they're frightened.
So you can lead with just being a man, and it's not just the 1 hour at the meeting. It's the 23 hours following. in that, you know, when I got sober, AA was 24/7, 365. And that's what I try to bring to the 7 a.m.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy, so much for being here with us. We really are grateful.
Thank you, Jimmy, for coming. And thank you for watching and listening. And we hope to see you next time. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell.